move forward to the moderated discussion. We have 4 speakers. The first is Eurion Thomas, European Operations Manager of FECPAK. And so, Eurion, I have a question for you. As I mentioned, it's very important to sell our diagnostics to the farmers. So, what are your opinion and what the benefits and limitation to stress when promoting fecal egg counts?
Yes, good afternoon, everybody. Yeah, the selling of fecal egg counting to the farmers to persuade them to pick up stool samples, fecal samples from the field is difficult. But, you know, there are many factors in terms of the benefits. One of the main ones, you know, in terms of, you know, what we talk about in how we do sell to farmers is the resistance story, obviously the anthelmintic resistance. However, I think we can be guilty of overdoing that story sometimes because it's a kind of negative story, the resistance, so on. So we do, and I've been guilty of doing this myself. So there's definitely the resistance and avoiding resistance, but there's lots of other benefits to talk about. So I mentioned, even if there was no resistance at all, monitoring what is happening by fecal egg counts or other means is actually still very important for farmers. So we talk about targeting treatment to when it's needed, and the responsible use of anthelmintics, so the responsible use of medicines is becoming really important. And the effect of using responsibly, targeting treatments which you know are working to the right animals at the right time, and looking at the performance benefits. So we've got to measure the performance benefits of being able to target the correct treatment at the right time, which we are doing, but it is difficult to do on a commercial farming enterprise. And I think the other parts as well, you know, is the environmental story, sort of great work done by, in Scotland by SIUC and Morden on the emission side. So the effect of parasitism on emissions and so on, which is obviously becoming a very important story in how food is produced. I think we need to be utilizing them, but there's the other side of environmental is the effects that the drugs, the chemicals are having in the soil when it comes out in the dung, so what effect it has on the dung and soil fauna. So I think it's really important to talk about the benefits sort of as a whole, and there's multiple factors there. Limitations, you mentioned, Laura, as well. As we know, limitations, there are a lot of limitations with fecal egg count, and it's important that we are open about that and we do discuss those. So it's the fact that we only pick up adults. Fecal egg counting only picks up adults, which at certain times of the year are very important. So we talk very openly to our clients and customers about that. We run a webinar early in the year, and that was one of the hot topics. But also the variation within tests and between tests. So, you know, people get excited, our clients get excited when they see a difference between 200 and 300 eggs per gram, but a lot of it is the education, if you went on the backup service to how we promote fecal egg counting and then understanding that and the combinations. And I think one of the key things for me is when we're selling fecal egg counting is we often look at fecal egg counting as a diagnostic, which it is a diagnostic, but sometimes we only think of it as a diagnostic and as a one-off kind of every now and again test, where we see the benefits of fecal egg counting. And what we try and sell is the regular monitoring. So fecal egg counting should be done on a regular basis throughout the season. So our best the customers that we have who are convinced with fecal egg counting are those who are doing 30, 40, 50 tests a year or more. So they are monitoring different groups of animals separately every time, and then doing that on a regular basis. So it's about tracking trends and also building up a picture. It's being data-driven, building up data, what's happening on farm, being able to share that with your advisor, veterinary advisor, or so on, and using that in a pattern. So I think we need to really push fecal egg counting as a regular monitoring tool, which is common practice on farms rather than if you went one-off diagnostics, I think.
Yeah, and we have some questions. Should anthelmintics be prescription only in response to high fecal egg counts or not?
I think the argument, yeah, it's interesting. There are parts of Europe now which we know are going to prescription only. It would be nice to sort of not have to go down that. It would be nice to actually have a kind of voluntary uptake from farms. But it looks as if sort of we are going down that track. I know in Ireland this is kind of an upcoming thing. So yeah, whether it should be, there's a bit of a political debate. I think we do need more care around how anthelmintics are sold. And only based around fecal high, I think you've got to be careful only around high fecal egg counts. I think fecal egg counts backing it up, but I think we have to be careful because we know sometimes we need to go in with a treatment, Laura, as you know, at low, nematovirus early in the season, we might have to do it. We saw an issue after our drought broke this year in the summer where we had a really big explosion of worms. So I think we've got to be careful only relying on fecal egg counts, but it's using data and information, which fecal egg count is a part of that.
Yes, and this especially is true for cattle, no? Where the low fecal egg count. Yeah,
absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Eurion. We move on. Menno Holzhauer is a scientist and consultant at Royal GD Deventer, the Netherlands. Menno?
Yes, good afternoon.
How
good
are
afternoon.
You? Fine?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for your participation. So,
okay.
How can vets be involved in diagnostic services in parasitology, according to your experience?
Yeah. To my experience, the role of the veterinarian, of the practitioner, is to advise the herdsman to monitor the herd for parasitic infections and to advise the herdsman for parasitic infections properly and advise the farmer for treatment, for metaphylactic treatment and preventive vaccination, and also to monitor the correct effect of treatment. So in our country, I think the first part of the answer is that is correct done, but monitoring is not very much done in practice. So that might be better. And then the challenge for the veterinarian is in case of problems is, of course, first to select the right animals for examination and to take the right samples for additional diagnostics, and the therapy applied and the correct expectation management. That's also very important to predict what the herdsman can expect. And I think, as we all know, the epidemiology of some parasitological infections is complex. So to be able to optimal advise the dairy farmer and proper handling of pharmaceuticals, good knowledge of this epidemiology is important.
So our role is to disseminate our knowledge to farmers. Maybe they should be educated regarding parasites.
Yes, absolutely. And that's all what also part of our work in our country to train the practitioners in taking the right samples and corrected advising of the dairy farmers.
Okay, thank you very much, Menno. Thank you. Okay,
you're welcome.
And now our expert, my co-leader and friend, and our expert on molecular diagnostics, Professor Georg von Samson Himmelsjerna from the University of Berlin. So, Georg, most of the presentation today were on molecular biology. And what do you think? What kind of new diagnostics are in the pipeline for the monitoring anthelmintic resistance from a molecular point of view?
Yeah, from the molecular point of view, I think we still have the problem that there's only basically one drug class. Now, after the talk of Cedric, we heard there's also some data, and that is the benzimidazoles. Now, after the talk from Cedric, we all have a nice impression again on how is the situation on molecular markers in nicotinic acetylene receptor acting compounds. There is some evidence for some markers there, but there, and also concerning the benzimidazoles, the recent findings published rather illustrate that there is a greater variety of polymorphisms in the field, also with relevance in different geographical regions, but maybe also in the same region in different populations, in the beta-tubulin sequences for BZ resistance. So what we sometime many years ago initially thought it's a codon 200, we know for long that's not the case. We know that there's also 167, 198, but now we also know in 198, for example, there are different amino acids which are changes which are associated with resistance. So it's becoming more and more complex, and that also limits a universal diagnostic tool. Optimally, of course, we would have a easy next generation sequencing test, but at least to date, this is, I think, not there that we can imagine this in the short term frame to become available for routine diagnostics. So I think we are a little bit, we have to get back into the science, and it will take more efforts to develop this. In this respect, I find it, what we also saw from Cedric's presentation, then also relevant to discuss testing on non-molecular basis with a more or less versatile multi-species, if that's possible, phenotypic test, in vitro test. Yeah, if that is giving you also, and that is of course immediately and much more directly giving you an impression of the susceptibility in the animals as well. If that is feasible, that's of course also quite, or very much attractive, I think. And
you think that milk ELISA is still a good tool to be used?
The milk ELISA, yes. I think it's a good tool to target treatment to herds which have a problem. Not on the individual animal basis, but as we've seen in the talk before, there is this association, I think, still, I believe it is there. And we also see it, that the effect on animals treated, that's a study where we were involved with primoparous animals, which were treated, then concerning milk production was increased only in herds with high ODR levels. So I think to identify herds being in where of benefit of enzymatic treatment is a good application of this tool.
Okay, thank you very much.
But maybe to add for the macrocyclic lactones, which are of course very, very important, we are way behind, or we're still lacking a lot of information, and we don't have even one slightly universally accepted or occurring molecular marker there. But that's still a big working place there.
But you are doing very well at your lab, so I'm sure that there will be some news in the pipeline from your lab.
I think the problem we are facing is the variability of the parasitic nematodes. Yeah, they have such a big genetic versatility and flexibility that maybe in the end, on different geographical regions, they'll always be able to evolve different specific mechanisms. And that'll be the challenge for the future, to deal with that.
Thank you very much, Georg. And our final expert is my lovely friend, Smaro Sotiraki from Greece. So in the past, we saw that Italy was a happy land for antimicrobial resistance, and maybe even Greece. So Southern Europe didn't face so much problems as Central and Northern Europe. Can you comment on the different situation in Europe, and also if we need different approaches to tackle antimicrobial resistance across Europe?
Good evening on my side. And of course, as you mentioned earlier with Hannah's paper that came out recently, we also saw that there was also lack of evidence. And exactly as you said earlier, Laura, if you search, you find. So it has to do also with the research effort in different areas. And of course, that it's one of the problems. And depending how organized the farmers are, how much they look for resistance, how well educated they are. And this is also in some eastern areas of Europe that it's lack of information. And of course, the management of the type of husbandry systems. For example, if we are mostly dedicated to milk and we have some limitations in which drugs we are using, then it means that we do not apply as many treatments per year as they do in Central and Northern Europe. And of course, it's the mentality of the farmers. I think if in countries that there are more sheep and goats and they are small farmers, that they are not so professional, they don't really follow instructions, so they don't do regular treatments, whereas in other countries they are more, I don't know, they comply more with what has to be done. And I'm coming back to Eurion's comments earlier that education, I think, is very important. So I wouldn't say that if there is need for different diagnostic approaches, is who applies what and how they are educated. I could never think that the farmers would ask themselves for testing, fecal count testing, and in Greece, and I would not expect also the vets to start doing fecal counts themselves. So it has to come from specialized laboratories. And to be honest, we have programs that they are driven from pharmaceutical companies that they actually offer to the vets for free, that we do fecal counts, and even the vets are not so willing to go to the farm and collect. They prefer just to sell drugs and with not really a management scheme. And especially if the farmer is not so professional to be able to pay.
Yeah, indeed, from the audience, how likely is it that farmers should adopt molecular diagnostics if they are not willing to go for fecal count?
Yeah, so we have to start from the basics first, and I think we start from education and what we expect. And that's, I think, the more important thing. And it has to do with the professional level, and it's different even with our countries. I think with the southern part, I think cattle farmers are more professional, and of course we don't have problem with cattle because the cattle are mainly indoors. We don't have the pastures and the ability due to the climate to graze outside. So that means that we don't have any problem with cattle. That doesn't mean that we use the anthelmintics correctly. But if the farmers are not that professional and they don't really go into other basic things, then parasites comes as a second, I think, priority.
Yeah, and also maybe we need new approaches because there is a high genetic diversity in the population of helminths, and this might confound also the anthelmintic resistance status, because yes, especially in Southern Europe, we have these polyparasites with several genus and species. And
also the climatic effect that we don't know how it affects the resilience and the resistance of the parasites.
Eurion, there is another question for you. How many subscribers you have at the moment?
That's a question I hadn't prepared for. I should look up before. Between our subscribers using mic's on, isn't it? Yeah. Between our subscribers using our systems on farm, and it's not only that, we actually use veterinary practices offering a service using our system, as well as retail stores using the system. So we have a number of farmers using them. We will have probably, I think it's about 500-600 users between the on-farm and people subscribing through vets and stuff using our sort of whether vets are using our systems. This is in the UK alone, so there's still a long way to go sort of on that. I want to probably add something into what Smaro and Menno mentioned in terms of the vet kind of role in this, and the veterinary role, where we have really good interaction and the uptake is where there is a really good relationship between the veterinarian or the animal health advisor, so the people selling the wormers, they have a good relationship with the farmer, and they work with them for proper health planning, and that does work very well. And as Smaro mentioned, maybe that the vets prefer to sell the product and the Antominic and so on. I think we're very lucky here in the UK. We have SCOPS as a big industry body, which is doing a massive amount of educating the veterinarian and the people who are selling the wormers over the counter. There's good education actually of those to help engage farmers in doing more of this. But yeah, we still, we get good inroads, but there's a long way to go still.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much to all the panel members. And now Johannes would like to show the Mentimeter results.
Okay, this was the first question shared with you. In fact, if you didn't yet answer, you can still enter. So go to menti.com with the code, enter responses. So from which country are you dialing in? As you can see, from a lot of countries. And I also learned that Wales and Scotland and UK are all different countries. So that's learning experience for me. But so we also see from Nigeria, Brazil, etc., but most from Europe. So let's try to go to the next slide. So still there are still some answers are coming in, so I will wait maybe a little bit. Because we are 100. Yes, of course we are at the time. I hope some of you, so this will only take, going through the questions, maximum, I think 10 minutes. So then we should really be able to close this meeting. I hope you can still stay with us until then. So maybe I'll wait until we have about 120 responses or something, or we'll see how quick it goes. How quick the votes go up. Okay, but anyway, so keep on answering. We will keep the records also for our report. But so the main message is clear here. A lot of different countries and a lot of Europe, as we of course expected. So I'll go to the next question. In your perception, is Antominic resistance on the rise in Europe? Yes, of course, this meeting is on this topic, but there's a clear picture on this, that a majority thinks that yes, it's on the rise in Europe. And so, well, this is of course not good news, but it's a job for us to work on this and make sure that in the future the problem becomes smaller instead of greater. So please, you can still continue to vote even if after if I change the slides, because the more inputs we have, the better. Then, okay, this is probably a difficult one. What kind of diagnosis is best suited to underpin sustainable parasite control? Okay, I can scroll. So there's a lot of different inputs, both fecal egg count reduction test and molecular markers. Also same minifloat and PCR. combination, I see. Fecal egg count reduction tests, combination. So we will have a good look at the different comments received, and hopefully we can include the general picture in our meeting report. So there were 37 inputs. I think even after the meeting, I'm not sure, but I think it should be open, the question, even for a few days after the meeting, so you may still be able to provide some inputs. And I see a lot of the same tests, combination of both, let's say, phenotypic tests, as Georg said, and molecular markers. Okay, so I go to the next slide. And I think this is the last one. What are the main diagnostic needs for assessment of anthelmintic efficacy in the field? So if we read the biggest words, these are the words that are most frequently reported: reliable, fecal egg count reduction tests, Parasite, quick results, inexpensive, user-friendly. So of course, yes, these are the keywords. We more or less know these. So we need to keep on working on these keywords so that our results, first we need to have tests. We learned from this meeting that in a lot of areas we still need tests. There are no practical tests yet. And once we have tests, yes, we have to work on cost effectiveness, on reliability, on quick results, etc.